and welcome everyone to today's lesson, which is about the verbs must and have to. Let me share my screen and take you through the slides. So we're going to look at the differences both in terms of formulation and concept of these two very common verbs, must and have to. So starting with formulation, looking at the present time frame, just reminding you that have to is an ordinary verb and must is a modal verb. So now in the present time frame, there is only one similarity between these two verbs in terms of formulation, and that is that they're both followed by the infinitive without to. So the base verb. I have to call her now and I must call her now. From now on, it's all differences. For example, as an ordinary verb, the verb have to needs an S, the third person singular S, for the pronouns he, she, and it. So it's I have to call her now, but he has to call her now. Whereas with modal verbs, we don't need an S. So it's I must call her now and he must. We never put an S on a modal verb, even with the pronouns he, she, and it. The next difference is that to make the verb have to into a question or a negative, we need a help verb. And in the present time frame, our help verb is does. So our negative question, for example, is doesn't he have to call her now? Whereas with a modal verb, we never need a help verb to create questions or negative sentences. Modal verbs take direct negative and question forms. So our negative question with the verb must is, mustn't he call her now? And the third difference is that as an ordinary verb, have to can combine with any modal verb. For example, the modal verb of possibility, may. He may have to call her now. Whereas two modal verbs never combine with each other. They can't come one after the other, so we cannot express this idea of possibility with must. That sentence doesn't exist. He may must call her now is not possible. So that's the present time frame. Let's look at the future time frame. What happens to these two verbs in the future time frame? Well, have to, again, as an ordinary verb, can combine with the modal verb will and create the future simple tense. So he or I will have to call her tonight. Whereas, again, the modal verb must cannot combine with will, so we can't say I or he will must. However, we can use must, actually the present form, also for a future idea, for a future time frame. So we can also say, I must call her tonight. And therefore, in the negative and question form, it's the same. Have to needs another help verb, a help verb, which is will in this case. Won't he have to call her tonight? Whereas must takes direct negative and question for the future as well. Mustn't he call her tonight? And that brings us to the past time frame, and as you can see, must has no past form at all. We cannot use must in any form for the idea, for its idea in the past. We can only use have to, and as an ordinary verb, obviously it has a past tense. I had to call her last night, and if we want to make it into negative or question, then we need the help verb did. Didn't he have to call her last night? So that's all in terms of formulation. Let's have a look at concept. So the most important concept or function of these two verbs is to express an obligation or a necessity to do something. Now, have to is more common when we express an external rule or obligation, whereas must is more common when we express a strong necessity felt by the speaker. For example, you have to stop at a red light. That's a rule, right? Whereas you must drive carefully is more a strong necessity coming from the speaker. It's not a rule, right? Now, if this distinction is not important, you can use either. So in the present form and also in the affirmative form, these two verbs are often interchangeable. So, for example, we can say, I have to finish my homework, or I must finish my homework. We're not sure. We know that it's a necessity, but we're not sure if it's a necessity because the teacher is expecting your homework, or it's because it's a feeling that you have that it's necessary to finish your homework. But they are interchangeable in the positive forms. Now, if now we want to express an obligation, external obligation, or a necessity not to do something, we can only use the verb must in its negative form, must not or mustn't. So if someone asks you whether something is an external rule, for example, do I have to stop at a red light? Yes, absolutely, you have to stop. You mustn't go through a red light. Make sure that you don't say you don't have to go through a red light. That doesn't say anything to your listener. Or if someone asks for a necessity, must he do his homework tonight? Oh yes, absolutely. He mustn't leave it for the weekend. Right, now the next concept or function is to remove an obligation, an external obligation, or a necessity. And in this case, it's the verb have to that you must use, not have to in the negative, obviously. For example, someone asks if it's an external obligation, if it's a rule, to stop at an amber light. Do I have to stop at an amber light? No, you don't have to. It's not a rule, it's not an obligation. You don't have to stop at an amber light. You can go through it. Or someone asks for a necessity. Must he do his homework tonight? No, and don't say he mustn't. Here, we're removing this necessity, so we go to the have to verb. No, he doesn't have to do it tonight. He can do it this weekend. Now, that's a very important thing to remember. Whether you are expressing an obligation or a necessity not to do something, that's with mustn't, and whether you are removing an obligation or a necessity, and that's then with the verb have to, not have to. You must remember that. All right, to finish, I'd like to mention that must, as a modal verb, also has another function, which is a positive deduction. What is a positive deduction? It's expressing certainty that something is true because of evidence, based on evidence. For example, she didn't sleep at all last night, so she must be very tired. Now, occasionally you may hear have to, the other verb, for a positive deduction, but must is a lot more common and it indicates more certainty. So stick to must for a positive deduction. That brings us to the question, what about a negative deduction? Is it with mustn't or is it with don't have to? Actually, it's with neither of them. For a negative deduction, you need to use different modal verbs and you can use either can't or couldn't. And now you will be expressing certainty that something is not true based on evidence. For example, she has slept for 12 hours. She can't be tired. She couldn't be tired. Right, that's the end of this short lesson on the differences between the ordinary verb have to and the modal verb must, both in terms of formulation and concepts. I hope it has been helpful. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. For more on this topic, click here. Remember to also check out my complete online course and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and happy studies!